Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at the Bennington Triangle in Vermont. It is known for many things, including disappearances, murders, strange weather, strange lights, odors, and sounds, rock cairns, Bigfoot, and places where there are no animal noises. I would like to add a trigger warning here. There are assaults leading to death and brief mentions of possible mental illness and suicide. If you need to click away, I completely understand. The Bennington Triangle is centered around Glastonbury Mountain and has the towns of Bennington, Woodford, and Shaftesbury. It's also the site of Somerset and Glastonbury, which are now vacant. The term was coined by author Joseph A. Citro. There is a lot going on here, so I'm going to tackle things in a chronological manner. The local Native Americans wouldn't go on Glastonbury Mountain except to bury their dead. They believed the place cursed because this is where the four winds meet for their eternal battle. In fact, the wind pattern on the mountain is so volatile that there can be sudden weather changes and the plants grow at odd angles. The Algonquin people say that among the cairns there is a stone that can swallow a man whole. To this date, no one knows who built the cairns or why. At least two of them were built in such a way that they capture the sun on the vernal equinox and the winter solstice. People have attributed the builders as being everyone from Native Americans to Celts. In the mid-1700s, settlers started moving into the area. The town of Glastonbury seemed doomed from the very start in 1761. A man named Benning Wentworth drew the town boundaries on a map, even though he had never seen the site in person. The area consists of rough terrain and a brief growing season. Settling the area was a true uphill battle. It all started with two towns, Fayetteville and South Glastonbury. But due to the terrain, they were never connected. Glastonbury was a logging and mining town that used up the nearby resources pretty fast. In the early 1800s was the first recorded sighting of Bigfoot, or the Bennington Monster as they called it. A stagecoach full of people had to stop due to inclement weather, and while stopped, the driver saw large footprints in the mud. Shortly after, the coach was attacked and knocked on its side by a large creature. Later, they would describe it as being over 6 foot or 2 meters tall, large, and covered in black hair. On May 11th, 1831, a man by the name of Roland Wheeler caused a great deal of chaos. In one account, he was noted to be a violent and jealous man. When the rumor spread that he was having relations with his sister-in-law, the community was livid. So men from the towns of Shrewsbury and Wallingford decided to form a mob. Armed with jugs of rum, a bucket of tar, and a sack of feathers, they set out to Wheeler's home. Being tarred and feather was popular back then, and undoubtedly so was rum. The group from Shrewsbury became lost and never made it. But the other group did arrive at Wheeler's home, and they broke in. 3 men ran inside and assaulted Wheeler, who stabbed one man in the side and slashed another a total of 14 times. Then the rest of the mob got in. Everyone started fighting everyone else, when someone, not surprisingly, was killed. Once the men stopped long enough to look over the body, they discovered it was one of their own group, a man named Isaac Osborne. It appeared as though Wheeler had escaped by prying up some loose floorboards and crawled out from beneath his house. After seeing that, the men panicked and fled. Wheeler, however, was caught and tried, but was found innocent under the terms of self-defense. However, 2 of the men that attacked him were fined $60 each, and another 3 $40 each. Now we're in 1892. Henry McDowell, a sawmill worker, beat a co-worker to death with a rock. He said the voices in his head told him to, plus he was very intoxicated at the time. McDowell was taken to a mental asylum, which he escaped from and was never seen again. After the resources petered out in 1894, the town tried to reinvent itself as a tourist spot. Buildings were converted into casinos and hotels. They even fitted the railroad tracks with trolley cars. They went all out in this endeavor. In 1897, John Harbour went into Brickford Hollow, just south of Glastonbury, to hunt. He was later found dead by gunshot. Oddly, it appeared as though he had been dragged for several yards, and his fully loaded gun was laying right beside him. Later that same year, the area experienced a major flood, which washed away much of the railroad tracks. Afterwards, people started to leave for more flourishing places. We're going to make a jump ahead to 1943 now. Mr. C. Herrick went on a hunting trip about 10 miles, or just over 16 kilometers, northeast of the now abandoned town of Glastonbury. 3 days after he had left, his body was found surrounded by large, unusual footprints. He had been squeezed to death. On November 12, 1945, a string of disappearances started. The first was Mitty Rivers. 74-year-old Rivers was an experienced hunter and guide. He had taken 4 men out on a hunting trip when he got ahead of them and then seemingly disappeared. After a thorough search, all they found was a single rifle cartridge on the bank of a river. Next was Paula Weldon. Weldon was an 18-year-old sophomore in Bennington. On December 1st, 1946, she set out to go for a short hike on the Long Trail. She even stopped Ernest Whitman, a Bennington Banner employee, for directions. She was wearing a red coat, however, she wasn't dressed for an extended period of time outdoors. Unfortunately, she never returned. A search was conducted with help from the FBI, and a reward was also offered, but no one ever found any evidence or came forward with any information. In the autumn of 1949, 3 hunters also went missing. Now this next one is really strange. On December 1st, 1949, James E. Tetfort went missing from a bus. Tetfort, a veteran, was visiting relatives in St. Albans and boarded a bus to return home at the Bennington Soldiers' Home. Witnesses say he was on the bus at the stop just before Bennington, but when they arrived at their destination, he was gone. Somewhere between that last stop and Bennington, he just vanished. His bags were still in the luggage compartment, and an open itinerary was on his seat. In 1950, an 8-year-old boy went missing on October 12th. Paul Jeffson was with his mother as she was out running errands and tending some pigs. She left the child in the truck for about an hour. When she returned, he was gone. Search parties were formed, and nothing was ever found. No one saw him, even though he was wearing a bright red sweater. Later, that same month, on the 28th, Frida Langer went missing. Langer, a 53-year-old woman, was at her family's campsite when she and her cousin, Herbert Elsner, left for a hike. Not long after, Langer slipped and fell into a creek. She told Elsner to wait for her while she went back and changed clothes. When she didn't return, he went to the campsite to discover that she hadn't showed up there either. Over the next 2 weeks, up to 5 searches were made, involving around 300 people, planes, and helicopters. No trace of her was found. That is, until May 12, 1951. Approximately 3.5 miles, or over 5 kilometers, away from the campsite was her body. It was found in Deerfield River, which had been searched after she went missing. The condition of her remains made finding the cause of death unobtainable. 16-year-old Martha Jones went missing on November 6, 1950. Huge search parties combed the area for days, but nothing was ever found. Then on December 3rd of that year, Frances Chrisman left her home to visit a friend that lived about a 20-minute walk away. She never arrived, nor was she ever seen again. Another jump in time to 1971. Lynn Schultz told her friends that she needed to run back to her dorm at Bennington College for something, and disappeared. She, too, was never found. Recently, the skeletal remains of a woman, nicknamed Red from Connecticut, was found in the gravel pit near the Somerset Reservoir. In August 2021, Joseph Schoenig was found dead in his truck, which was red, in the parking lot by the Somerset Reservoir. The cause of death was reported to be suicide. Needless to say, red is considered an unlucky color even to today. And one source states that as many as 40 people have went missing in the Bennington Triangle. Which leads us to all the theories surrounding the area. Number 1, it is in fact cursed, as the Native Americans say. Number 2, the Bennington Monster, although I was unable to find any recent sightings. Number 3, hypothermia. Even if people tried to find a place to stay warm, you would think some of them would have been found. Plus, it doesn't explain the bodies that were found. Number 4, people fell into old mining shafts and or cellars. As you can see, much of Vermont has been mined. Number 5, a serial killer. Most serial killers have a type, and an 8-year-old boy to a 53-year-old woman is a pretty big variety. Number 6, lastly, we have aliens. With there being unusual sights, sounds, and smells in the area, it's not surprising. An interesting fact, Vermont has the most UFO sightings per capita in the United States. So what are your thoughts? Would you go exploring there? Leave your comments down below, and please like and subscribe. Thanks for hanging out with me.